Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. It's really exciting to welcome you to the launch of the fourth round of the NHS Cancer Programme Innovation Open Call. For those of you who have not met, of course, it's impossible to see everybody online. My name is Richard Gilbertson, and I've had the privilege of chairing the NHS Innovation External Advisory Group for the NHS Cancer Programme for a number of years now. And I think it just gives me an opportunity to thank all of the team at NHS and the Cancer Programme, but also those on the external advisory group, the expert advisory group, who've done a fantastic job in helping to shepherd this programme forward. Also to say hi to Peter Johnson, who I'll be handing over to in a minute, for the support that he's given this programme. So it's great to welcome you all. If we could go to the next slide, please, for the agenda, that'd be helpful, thank you. So essentially over the next couple of hours, what you're going to hear is more about the focus of this competition. As I've mentioned, we'll start with Peter Johnson, who'll provide an overview of the clinical needs of the programme and really essentially what the competition is aiming to address. And then that'll be followed by Dr. Emma Hughes, who will go a little bit more into the detail of the two funding models that will be available. And then there'll be a Q&A session giving you the chance to ask questions, both with Peter and Emma. And after that, Charmaine Mulligan from the SBRI healthcare team will walk us through the application process, what to expect, who are handling the application process. And then finally, Victoria Doyle and Nicola Bent will talk about how the Cancer Alliances and the Healthcare Innovation Network can support your proposals. And there'll be plenty of time at the end, I hope, for more questions. So next slide, please. So just a few usual housekeeping things before we dive into it. If you could ensure that all mics and cameras are switched off, obviously unless you're talking during the Q&A, that just helps keep background noise to a minimum. And we'd like you to use the Q&A function to ask questions during the session, and the presenters will pick up those during the dedicated Q&A sessions. If you do have technical issues, please flag those in the chat. We'll be monitoring the chat to make sure we know what's going on. And the slides and recording of today will be available actually on the competition webpage from next week. So you'll have plenty of chance to go back and look at this again if you miss anything today. And you can also reach the SBRI healthcare team for more information as well. So next slide, please. So it's pretty incredible to think we've actually run 3 rounds of this open call so far. And what that's led to, that's a portfolio of about 21 projects and a £40 million investment, which, as you can see on the slide, have seen since doubled private investment as a result of these partnerships. It's been a really exciting venture, which we really didn't envisage happening when we started this. Now, both the 10-year health plan and also the National Cancer Plan recognise the need, of course, of the NHS to continue to innovate and improve care for patients. So it's very exciting that we're able to announce this again, against, as we know, quite difficult funding times, the investment and the faith that is still being placed in this programme. So there are 3 main things that the call is aiming to do. The first of those is to accelerate the adoption of innovations that can really have great potential to address challenges in cancer care. The second is to generate evidence to support the commissioning decisions. And the third of those is to provide funding to bridge the gap between research and routine NHS commissioning. Now, many of the sort of innovations you can see on the screen have gone on to achieve wider spread commissioning within the NHS. And the evidence, the partnerships generated through our projects has been part of their success. And I think that's really what the ethos of this whole programme has been about since its inception. It's really about sort of moving innovations from that area in maybe late stage research when there's some evidence, but actually into patient benefit. And it's been fantastic to see that happening. Now, systems partners are critical in this. We've enabled 340 collaborations, really working with every Cancer Alliance and almost every healthcare innovation network. And the first 2 rounds of the competition alone, our pilots actually reached over 220,000 patients throughout the NHS. So it's fantastic to welcome so many new potential applicants today. If we can move to the next slide, I'm going to pass over to Professor Peter Johnson, who is the National Clinical Director for Cancer. So Peter, great to see you again, and thank you for taking it from here.
Brilliant, Richard. Thank you so much. And again, thanks for all the work on the chairing the expert committee that's helped us to sift through all the different brilliant ideas that came in through the first three rounds of the innovation funding. So if we go to the next slide, please. You'll know that earlier this year we published the National Cancer Plan, setting out our ambitions for the next decade in the delivery of cancer services. And there were a couple of key points that resonated very strongly with the idea of how we might encourage innovation. One of these is what you might characterize as the productivity challenge for the NHS. We know we have a expanding and aging population, and we know that we need to do more with the resources and the workforce that we have at our disposal. So one of the things we wanted to focus on in this round of Innovation Challenge was to look at ways in which we could improve performance. And I'll talk a little bit more about some of the performance challenges we've had in a minute, but specifically look at ideas and innovations which would help us to manage the demand or improve the capacity in cancer care pathways to make sure that we achieve one of our headline ambitions from the cancer plan, which is to restore the cancer waiting times by March 2029. The second key ambition is to continue to drive up the rates of survival from cancer. And again, this comes back to something that we've spent time on in previous funding rounds, the early detection and diagnosis of cancer. And we know that there are a lot of different technologies out there, a lot of different ideas coming through commercial partners, screening, case finding, driving up presentations, diagnostic tools. And again, if we're to achieve our ambition of 75% 5-year survival by 2035, we're going to need to continue to innovate in this space to make sure that we're finding cancer as early as possible and looking after people as efficiently as possible. So those are our two principal headline ambitions, as I say, map very closely onto the cancer plan. So if we go on to the next slide, please. And the next one, as I say, this is about addressing what you might call the productivity challenge for the NHS. The graph on the left of your slide shows the numbers of people's being referred in per 100,000 of the population. So that's the blue line, and you can see it's gone up from under 2,000 to over 5,000 per 100,000 of the population. And put in numerical terms across England, that's more than 3 million people a year referred on urgent suspected cancer pathways. And that's gone up threefold since about 2010. So huge numbers of people being referred in for the obvious reason that we have asked colleagues in primary care to try and help us to diagnose cancer sooner. And of course, in much of the time, that's involved referring in for investigation in hospitals. Similarly, during that time, we've seen the proportion of people referred on those pathways who actually are found to have cancer progressively sinking from around 10% back in 2009-10 to around 6% in 2022-23. So the so-called conversion rate, the proportion of people found to have cancer out of all those referrals, has gone down as the number has gone up. So that of course has put a huge strain on the system, particularly on the diagnostic system. And we can see from the graph on the right here that we are also hostage to the demographics. These are the numbers of cancers diagnosed per year in England, which have gone up from about 230,000 in 2001 to closer to 350,000 in 2023. And you can see that that's predominantly in the 50 to 85-year-old age group, with a small increase in the younger people as well. But those are the numbers which have driven the pressure on the system in the NHS and has led to the pressure on cancer waiting times, which is on the next slide. So again, people will be aware that we are working to a standard of 28 days to get people a diagnosis or to be discharged for having been referred, and that 85% of them, of people referred, will start treatment within 2 months of referral, so-called 62-day standard. And that, of course, is the critical one. And the graph on the right there shows you the struggle that we've been having since about 10 years ago, with a progressive decline until just after the pandemic of our ability to meet that standard. In the last couple of years, we've started to turn that around, but we're still a very long way from where we would like to be in terms of meeting the waiting time standard. So I think those two slides give you important context in the rising demand and the challenges in the system of meeting that demand and making sure that Firstly, we're able to reassure the great majority of people they don't have cancer very rapidly. And secondly, for the people who do have cancer, the small minority of those referred, to make sure that we're making the diagnosis and moving them very rapidly through pathways to treatment. So what are we looking for in the innovation applications? If I could have the next slide, please. So we're looking for different areas, and this is by no means an exhaustive list, but I hope it gives you an idea. Firstly, for how we better manage the demand, how we can find better means of triage, of selecting people who are most likely to have cancer out of those referred or out of those presenting in primary care, to enable us to focus our diagnostic capabilities on the people at highest risk. Secondly, thinking of ways to release capacity to make diagnoses faster, streamlining of pathways, streamlining of diagnostics. And thirdly, on the therapeutic end, on the treatment end, thinking of how we can release capacity to treat patients faster. And the sort of things that we have in mind, as I say, are triage tools, and people will be aware of our use of something like fecal immunochemical testing to establish people's background risk of colorectal cancer as a means of focusing where we put our efforts in colonoscopy. So those sorts of tools which allow us to triage between those at high risk and those at lower risk, particularly in primary and community settings, or indeed in secondary care. Secondly, processes to speed up the diagnosis, whether that's one-stop tests, whether it's tests brought into diagnostic settings to help us to speed up one-stop or access clinics, those sorts of things, or indeed means of speeding up the process for the multidisciplinary team discussion of cases and the triaging of people who need treatment and what sort of treatment they require. So potentially lots of different things that could be done in that space, helping us to make efficient clinical decisions and to speed up the administrative processes. We're all painfully aware that in many cases a lot of what slows down the process is not clinical time or diagnostic capability, it's the nuts and bolts of administration and organization. And so innovative solutions to help us to do that more efficiently and help us to make decisions quicker in the multidisciplinary team and plan treatment quicker. All of those are very much in scope for this area of, as I say, trying to particularly help to streamline, to remove the friction in the system, all the way from people presenting in primary care and in community settings, all the way through the diagnostic process, the assimilation of information, and then the planning of treatment. So a pretty broad canvas for that, for improving productivity. And the next slide, please. The second challenge is to continue focusing on early detection and diagnosis of cancer through screening, prompt presentation, case finding, diagnostic tools. And the next slide, please. We are all very well aware, I think, that survival from cancer is best when you catch it early. The graph on the left there shows you the stage-specific survival, the 5-year survival proportions, 1-year survival proportions for people presenting at different stages. And you can see that in prostate cancer, there isn't very much drop off, whereas in something like lung cancer, there's a very big drop off from those presenting with stage 1, 2 cancer to stage 3, 4. And so we're particularly keen to continue to push towards the left to try and diagnose people as early as possible. And for the decade prior to the pandemic, during the time that we saw that huge increase in suspected cancer referrals, we really didn't see a shift in the rates of early diagnosis, the proportion of patients diagnosed at stages 1 and 2. And what the graph on the right shows you, and there are several lines, but the pale blue smoothed one is probably the most useful one to look at, which is the proportion diagnosed at stage 1 or 2, smoothed as an average. What we can see is, although there was a dip and a recovery post-pandemic, what's happened since the pandemic is we've seen a steady rise in the rates of early cancer diagnosis from a starting point of around 55% to just under 60% now. And the most recent month, we're at above 60% early diagnosis. And that's driven strongly by a couple of cancer types, particularly lung cancer, as we've rolled out our lung cancer screening program using low-dose CT, and also a lot more prostate cancer being picked up as a consequence of public awareness of the risks of prostate cancer, as well-known people have talked about their diagnosis, and more people have come for PSA testing. So obviously what we want to do is continue to accelerate this process and to spread it out to a variety of other cancers besides lung and prostate, which, as I say, is of what have led the charge in this area. So next slide, please. What we would particularly like to do is to reduce the amount of variability in the rates of early cancer diagnosis. So the plot on the left here shows you on the vertical axis the absolute numbers of cancers diagnosed in the country each year, and along the bottom there are the proportion of those cancers diagnosed at early stage. So you can see top right, we diagnose around 43,000 breast cancers a year, but about 85% of those are at stages 1 and 2. Conversely, down on the bottom left, something like esophageal cancer, we're diagnosing around 8,000 a year, but only 20% of those are at early stage. So the left-hand side of this diagram is where we particularly want to focus our efforts. And as I've already said, we've focused on lung cancer, and that's already moving to the right. But you can see that there's a whole slew of different cancer types. Not all of them highly prevalent, but nonetheless, collectively a very large number of cancers where we really have got plenty of headroom to make progress on much earlier diagnosis. And that's what we would like to particularly focus on is that area. The other thing we would particularly like to think about is how we take this to the people in society who find it hardest to access medical care. We know that there is a deprivation gradient in the likelihood of early diagnosis, and what the figure on the right shows you is how that's been changing over time. So the pale purple line at the bottom is the most deprived quintile by postcode, and the green line at the top is the least deprived, and you can see that there's about just under a 10% spread between those two. That has been notably narrowing in the last few years, and that's very much a concomitant of the data I showed you about the rise in the rates of early cancer diagnosis, which is mainly driven by lung cancer. And that's because we've been targeting our lung cancer screening program at the areas of the country where we have the highest deprivation, the highest rates of lung cancer, the highest rates of late stage diagnosis. And so the fact that those bottom lines, the more deprived quintiles, have started to come up closer to the top is heavily driven by our ability to diagnose lung cancer earlier. And what we obviously want is similar ideas that we can take to other cancer types to see whether taking these out to the community, this much more proactive approach to identification of people at highest risk and offering them investigations, preferably in a community setting close to where they live so that they don't have to come to hospital, all part of the hospital to community and treatment to prevention drive that we've set out in the 10-year plan for health. We want particularly to see if there are innovations out there that can help us to do that, along the same lines as we've been able to achieve with low-dose CT for lung cancer. But I think there is a variety of other technologies out there that I hope would allow us to be much more proactive in the way that we take healthcare to people. So the last slide, please, if I may. So again, in this area, we're particularly looking for applications to identify and test people who are asymptomatic but at highest risk, so that we would identify those people in the community who have the highest risk for which we don't have an existing screening program, or indeed improve the uptake or the response to existing screening programs. So we're looking for both of these things, either things which might enhance the uptake of breast, bowel, cervical, lung screening, or things which would screen previously unscreened people. We want to find ways, again, to drop the barriers for presentation for people with early symptoms who notice health changes, either through primary care or through similar services. Again, looking particularly at community and primary care solutions to make sure that we can identify the people at highest risk who need specialist investigation. And again, looking for ways of earlier diagnosis for symptomatic patients through risk stratification and improved diagnostic pathways. And again, some examples at the bottom of the slide here, which are by no means exhaustive, but I hope give you an idea of the sorts of things that we're seeking to support. And really important to emphasize that what we're wanting to do here is not pure research. We're not trying to generate de novo evidence. What we're looking to do is take things which have already got the research evidence there and look at how we can bring them into use in the NHS with a view to then moving them into routine commissioning in due course. So I will stop at that point and hand over to my colleague Emma Hughes, who is organising this in the NHS England programme.
Thank you so much, Peter. I think Peter's given us a really great overview of the clinical and also patient and population level challenges that we're looking to address through innovations for this funding call. Just to introduce myself, I'm Emma Hughes, Transformation Lead within the NHS Cancer Programme team, and I oversee the delivery of this call. Next slide, please. So for this call, we have two complementary funding modes. As Peter's already mentioned, we're really looking at supporting the implementation of innovations that already have a significant evidence base. There are other funding programs and funding opportunities out there, for example, from the NIHR that support that earlier stage clinical research. But what we're really aiming to do is bridge the gap between research and routine implementation and commissioning. So our two funding modes are our real-world implementation and evaluation fund. This is a continuation of what we have already done through the past 3 rounds of our open call. It's really hoping to support the implementation and concurrent evaluation of innovations across multiple NHS sites. The innovation spread funding mode is a new funding mode for this call. This is really aiming to address a couple of barriers that we know are out there to the spread of proven innovation. The first barrier being the desire from commissioners to know that an innovation will definitely deliver value for their local population and for their local setting before they make an investment in an innovation. And then the second barrier is really that funding for the wraparound transformation processes and funding the change as well as the technology or the innovation. So next slide, please. So just to give you a little bit more detail on those two available funding modes, for that real-world implementation and evaluation fund, we are offering up to, or we're looking for applications for up to £3 million for a 24-month project. And in terms of the eligible applicants, they can be any innovator organisation. So the innovator organisations can be commercial companies or they can be non-commercial NHS sites or academic entities. But the applicants need to have a demonstrable partnership with at least one adopting NHS organisation already. And then we would be looking for, through the course of the project, the innovation to be adopted across multiple sites and the concurrent evaluation of that implementation. So the applicants need to come to us with a partnership with at least one NHS site already, but also with an independent evaluation partner as well. In terms of the entry point for the innovations that we're seeking, as already mentioned, we're really looking for mature innovations that already have an evidence base. And we need to see that for technologies where it is required, there's already regulatory approval obtained for the use case that is intended to be used as part of the application. We also need to see evidence of safety and also clinical utility from the prospective use of the innovation within at least one healthcare site. And we've made a distinction in terms of the two different challenge areas. So for the productivity challenge, we need to see that evidence from an NHS site. But then for the early diagnosis challenge, the evidence can come from an international healthcare setting. But the idea is that we really need to see that evidence of positive impact from a prospective evaluation from at least one site. In terms of exit point then, the exit points for the real world implementation and evaluation fund are that there should be an independent process, impact and health economic assessment of the innovation across multiple NHS sites that will then serve to inform that onward adoption and spread of the innovation at the end of the project. For our new spread fund, applicants will be able to apply for up to £5 million and undertake a up to 3-year project. The applicants, in contrast to the real world implementation and evaluation fund, the applicants are the adopter organisations. So the applicants can either be, the lead applicant can either be an integrated care board or a cancer alliance. And they have to be in partnership with each other. So the aim of those spread funding projects are to spread an innovation across sites within at least one cancer alliance. We are employing a outcomes-based match funding model. So the idea being that we're looking to overcome that barrier to commissioners investing in technologies before they've had the chance to see that they definitely deliver value in their local setting. So NHS England will be able to provide 100% of the funding for the technology, but also the wraparound implementation costs in that first year. And then year 2 will be a transition year where the costs will then transition from NHS England to the Integrated Care Board. And then finally, in year 3, we would expect 100% of the funding to come from the Integrated Care Board for the ongoing service delivery and any decommissioning activity that still needs to happen by that point. So the idea is that during that year 2, there will be a set of agreed key performance indicators that need to be met in order to enable that go, no-go decision and transition from NHS England funding for the innovation to the ICB funding. So then in terms of innovation entry point, so the level of maturity of innovation that we're looking for, this is really for spreading proven innovations. So the innovations have to already have an independent process, impact, and also health economic assessment across multiple NHS sites in England. And then the exit point that we're looking to achieve is really that transition into business as usual service delivery across the sites within at least one cancer alliance. Again, contingent on those year 2 outcomes being met. So I think with that, I can hand over, well, we can go to the next slide, please. And I can hand over to Katerina, who is taking over the chair for the rest of the webinar, and we can take some questions from the audience.
Thank you, Emma, and thank you very much, Peter, for this overview. And yeah, as Emma said, hi everyone, and my name is Caterina Lombardo, and I'm a program lead in the SBRI healthcare team, and I'm really excited to take the steering wheel of Richard for the following sessions. So I see that Peter and Emma are diligently on camera already, so we can move to the Q&A from the audience. And before we move on to questions, just a couple of reminders. So today is a lot of you on the call. We won't be able to answer all the questions that you're asking, but we promise that we will publish an answer to those that are unanswered today, next week, updating our frequently asked questions document online. And then another thing, at the moment, today, we'll only address questions live, so we won't have a capacity to answer in writing. But again, next week, everything will be answered, so bear with us. And if you're having problems with the Q&A box, do log in again, because it seems to be working fine for most of us. If you ask a question on the chat, I won't be able to read it, so please use the Q&A box. And with this little overview, let's crack on with questions. There are already quite a few that have been fired up for you. And I think that the first one, Emma, might be for you. So a participant is asking if a technology is already implemented at a trust within a cancer alliance, can the Innovation Spread Fund be used to implement the technology of further trusts within the Cancer Alliance patch?
I think the straightforward answer, Katerina, is yes. This is what we're looking to support with the Innovation Spread Fund.
Thank you very much. And I think, at the same time, we have something that probably will be quite straightforward as well. So if a technology is already implemented across trusts within a Cancer Alliance patch, can an application be made under the Innovation Spread Fund to continue service delivery?
So yeah, that one is maybe a little bit less straightforward, but essentially the answer is no. So the aim of the Innovation Spread Fund, as I mentioned, is to overcome those two barriers, particularly that barrier existing for commissioners to invest in something that without that evidence that it definitely works within their setting and in their patch. So if something has already been implemented and there has been the opportunity for the commissioners to see its demonstration of value, that would not be eligible to be funded through the spread fund, because the expectation would be that the local commissioners would be able to make their decision to continue funding its service delivery if it's delivering the outcomes that they wanted to see.
Thank you very much. I hope that was clear, and I'm sure we will get lots of questions along these lines. Now I have one for Peter, and I need to ask people to please use the Q&A box for the questions. I see lots have been asked in the chat, but I won't be able to read them. So Shazad is saying that the system faces a paradox. We need to increase screening uptake in underserved populations, yet also improve referral conversion rates. Is the SBRI specifically looking for solutions that resolve these by getting the right people into pathways earlier rather than simple more people? Peter, do you want to?
So I think we need to separate here screening programs, asymptomatic screening programs, breast cancer, bowel cancer, cervical cancer, lung cancer, where we know that the screening is a valuable thing to do and where we want to screen as many people as possible and to drive uptake of those. So the asymptomatic screening programs, which are already approved, we're very keen to see ideas which will help us to reach particularly those parts of the population who don't take up the offer of screening so much. The other bit about what you call conversion rates is people presenting with symptoms for referral on urgent suspected cancer pathways. And there we very much want to see if we can improve the efficiency and get better at selecting the people at highest risk at the outset to have them referred in for investigation, or to have them investigated indeed in primary care or community settings to make an assessment of their risk. So asymptomatic screening programs and symptomatic referral pathways, quite different things, but I agree that we are there's a degree of conflation, but we really want to address both of those questions.
Thank you, Peter. And now I have a question about the eligibility criteria, which is why are technologies that fall into the 4 National Health Tech Access Program and HUB topics being excluded from the spread fund? Emma, do you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, sure, Katerina. Yes, I did think I mentioned that within my presentation, but it is included in the challenge brief. The reason why the technologies or the topics within the National Health Tech Access Programme are being excluded from the spread fund is because if there is a positive, nice technology appraisal for those technologies, then the expectation will be that there will be a national reimbursement approach and also national support for adoption. So therefore, our spread funding would have been duplicative. So that's why they are excluded. But they are still eligible to apply for the Real World Implementation and Evaluation Fund to continue to generate the evidence that would then feed into those nice technology appraisals.
Thank you. And actually, there was a follow-up question, so you answered both. Thanks for clarifying that. Then I have another question about Real World Implementation and Evaluation Fund. Some of the participants are asking if we can clarify what we mean by independent evaluation partner. Are you potentially, Emma, do you want to comment on that?
Yes, sure. So by independent evaluation partner, we mean an organization that is independent from the innovation that is being implemented and tested. And so they don't have any financial ties to the innovator organization aside from being commissioned to do the evaluation.
Thank you.
And maybe if I can just add, in terms of the kinds of organizations that we would expect to see as independent evaluation partners, these could be academic organizations or health innovation networks who do have quite a lot of expertise in terms of real world evaluation processes. So yeah, just as examples of the kinds of organizations we would anticipate being involved.
Thank you, Emma. And Peter, I'll move to you now. Obviously, both feel free to add anything if you need to do so. But there is a question from Martin. Is the call specifically for improving cancer treatment and diagnosis? For example, would improving treatments associated with side effects of cancer treatment be eligible?
We're primarily looking at diagnosis and treatment. I think if ways of looking after people which reduce the burden of illness as a result of the treatment were possible, that was something that we would consider, because again, it's about how we help people to get diagnosed and treated more effectively, and at the same time how we take the pressure off the system. It would depend a bit on what the innovation was and how it was being implemented, but I think certainly we would consider things which improve the experience of treatment, and particularly if it, for example, kept people out of hospital or reduced their need to access acute oncology and things like that.
Thank you. Emma, anything to add, or happy to move on to the next question?
I think maybe just to add that the sort of ambition that we're really focusing on in terms of the National Cancer Plan is that impact on the cancer waiting time standards. So yeah, we are looking for things, I would say probably primarily impacting on that earlier end of the pathway, so that we can make sure that people are not waiting too long for their diagnostic procedures and also their treatments.
Yeah, thank you. And to that note, maybe to add to, obviously we haven't published all the documentation yet, but you will see when the application form templates will go live, we will be asking some evidence of impact that will help us projecting how you will impact either productivity or early diagnosis. And is that standard times that we will be focusing on. So we will tend to give priority to those that can show a higher shift. So yeah, thank you. Okay, now we have a few questions. Clearly, the new model is something quite interesting and new, and maybe we have a few things to clarify on that. For example, there is a question from Dominic that would like some more clarity about one application for Cancer Alliance. Is one application per mode or challenge, or are joint alliance applications counting towards the one application per alliance? I wonder if we want to share with the audience a little bit more about what's the rationale of one application per Cancer Alliance. Are you okay to start, Emma, with that?
Yeah, sure. So the rationale is really that we only have finite resources or finite funding for this call, and there are only finite resources out there in the system. So we're really encouraging, particularly for that spread fund, that people focus on one thing that they want to spread across their Cancer Alliance. So that's why we've asked for just one application per Cancer Alliance. And so that would be across both funding both challenge areas, and also if there's a partnership with another cancer alliance, that would also count as their one application. Yeah, really, we're looking to focus our efforts and try to get the most out of concentrating on delivery of one project and making sure it's successful.
Yeah, and I think it's a matter of the ambition, right? So pick the project that is most ambitious and can reach the most impact, I guess. Peter, and if you have anything to add, feel free to chip in. Okay, so I think I have a question for you then, Peter. Will this call accept projects focusing on reduction of cardiotoxicity adverse effects by tailor-suited cancer therapy or cancer patients' diagnosis, like machine learning approach?
I think that's a stretch, quite honestly, for this call. That's very much about managing side effects of treatment rather than increasing treatment capacity or speeding up treatment and diagnosis. So I think that would be somewhat outside the remit of this call.
Thank you very much. And I think along the lines of eligibility, this is a little bit more about evidence, but Kevin is asking for some technologies, for example, EMDT referral platforms, there are little or no published data. Am I right in thinking that any technology that has is published data or show independent health economic evaluation are excluded?
No, I don't think that would be the case. I think if they've got published data or they've got a health economic evaluation, but they're not widely implemented, then the process of implementation and uptake is something that this program absolutely would support if it's a means to streamline things like MDT function or referral pathways and so forth. So having published data supporting your technology is not a bad thing in this context. On the contrary, it helps us. As I said earlier, we're not trying to fund research here. We're trying to fund the process of moving from having research evidence into broad implementation in the NHS.
And I wonder if that was the way the question was asked, but it sounded like we would like to have actually robust evidence, but it has to be in the use case you're going to apply for. I think that's the key message. And there is a question about the level of prospective evidence that is expected for the real-world implementation fund. So peer-reviewed publication, case studies, white papers, are we happy to share examples of what we would like?
Yeah, I mean, the stronger the objective evidence you have in support of your technology, the easier it's going to be to approve proposals. So people that have peer-reviewed publications, health technology reviews, whatever, supporting your proposal are going to be a stronger applicant than things for which there's only, for example, in-house data. So I think, as always, there's a hierarchy of evidential support for the things we're trying to do. And as I say, we're looking for technologies which are relatively mature and have a convincing evidence base to look at how we implement those in service.
Thank you. And I'm conscious of time. I have a couple of questions that probably Emma can address, and I would like to ask before we move on. Peter, are you happy to stay on a couple more minutes, or do you have to log off?
No, that's fine.
Okay, so in case you need to chip in, I think these two are quite important. So there is one that says a large number of ICBs are undertaking huge change programs currently, as we know. This could have a significant impact on capacity to bid and then delivery projects. ICBs might also not be the long-term funders of innovations being introduced. So is there a scenario where a bid could come from a provider or a collaboration of providers? Emma, what is our comment on that and what's our take?
Yeah, so firstly on, I guess the second part of the question, we do anticipate that ICBs will be the strategic commissioners for most of the innovations that's being set out within the expectations for ICBs last year. So then we come to the first half of your question, which is around the ICB capacity. we acknowledge that at the moment they are under a great deal of strain, which is why we opened up our, we have established the fund to accept applications from cancer alliances as the lead applicants, but they need to have that buy-in from the local commissioner, which we anticipate being the Integrated Care Board. So yeah, essentially the answer is, for this call, we won't accept the lead applicants being a provider organisation or a network of provider organisations. And the other element is that we are really keen to be able to drive spread of innovations, and the implementation across a few providers or even a network of providers is something that we have already achieved through the real world implementation and evaluation fund. So the spread fund is really designed to do something more and push the boundaries in terms of spread of those innovations.
Okay, thank you very much. And there is a question from Claire, but I think I would like to answer that later after we have also Victoria and Nicola speak. So if there aren't any other questions, I would like to thank both Emma and Peter for the presentation, and Peter for joining. I know you have other engagements, so thank you so much for coming today. Really appreciate it. And now we can move on to the next part of the webinar. Also, Emma will be back anyway in the second Q&A session, so don't worry, you will have her again. But for now, I'll introduce you to my colleague, Charmaine Mulligan, which is a senior program manager in the SBRI Healthcare team, and she's going to talk about the application process. Thank you, Charmaine, over to you.
Thanks, Kate. Hi, everyone. I'm Charmaine from the SBRI team. And so today I'm going to give you an overview of the application process and then some of the things to consider when you put together an application. So next slide, please. So before you decide to apply, please read the challenge brief on the website carefully and make sure you meet the eligibility criteria. So you've heard what the focus is of the two challenge areas from Peter just now. So does your innovation deliver against one of those two challenges in productivity or early diagnosis? Next slide, please. And the other part of making sure that you're eligible is checking that the innovation is at the right stage for the funding that you're applying for. So for the real world implementation and evaluation funding, which is outlined on the left-hand side of your screen in green, the lead applicant can be a company, an NHS trust, a charity or a university, and they must be based either in the UK or the EU. At minimum, the application should include the organisation with the innovation, implementation sites, which need to be in England, and an independent evaluator. The innovation must have the regulatory approvals for the intended use, so where applicable, CE or UKCA mark. Additionally, the innovation should have clinical utility and safety data from prospective use in at least one site. And if your innovation is meeting the productivity challenge, the prospective use must be from an NHS site. And the main goal of the real world implementation and evaluation funding is to generate an independent evaluation of all the outcomes from an implementation. Projects are expected to last for 2 years and can apply for a maximum of 3 million. So for the spread funding, which is highlighted in the pink on the right-hand side of the screen, the lead applicant must be either the ICB or the Cancer Alliance. And both the ICB and the Cancer Alliance must be partners in the project, along with, at minimum, implementation sites, again in England, and the innovation provider. And you heard in the Q&A, and it's important to note that each Cancer Alliance for the spread funding can only be named on one application. The eligibility criteria for the spread funding include that the innovation has already been implemented in multiple sites, it has an independent evaluation and economic assessment, and it should also be ready to procure. And in the case of digital innovations, be compliant with DTAC and be interoperable. And the goal of the project is to scale the implementation of the innovation across a wider number of sites within the Cancer Alliance footprint. And if it meets criteria, to transition the innovation to sustainable everyday practice. So projects are expected to last for 3 years, with the Innovation Open Call funding the projects to start, but over the course of the project, as long as agreed KPIs are met, the funding for the project will transition to the ICB during year 2. And applications can be up to 5 million. So next slide, please. So to apply, you will need to submit an application through the online portal. We're working on a provisional date for the portal to open later in September, but keep an eye on the website for more details. It's important, though, to use the time now to form the partnerships and scope your project, as the portal is generally open for 6 weeks. Applications, once they're received, are checked for eligibility, and then they're reviewed by external reviewers with a range of different specialisms that include clinical, technical, commercial, and implementation expertise. The strongest applications are shortlisted and undergo further reviews with clinical specialist and patient reviewers, alongside some input from the potential impact and fit with NHS England priorities. The shortlisted applications are invited to present to the panel, who will then ask some questions to the project team. And the panel is made up of a mix of expertise that again includes clinical, technical, commercial, and implementation experts. And the panel will make a recommendation for which projects to fund, and then SBRI will conduct some due diligence and prepare the funding contract. And we're looking for projects provisionally to start in April next year. Next slide, please. So to give you an idea of what a real-world implementation and evaluation project might include, we've already talked about the entry point, so what's needed to be eligible in terms of safety, clinical utility, regulatory approvals. So during the project, the main activity will be the implementation of the innovation. We'll also include work packages such as some small levels of product development, possibly training of staff for using the innovation, patient and public involvement, understanding how the innovation impacts health inequalities, a plan looking at the carbon impact of the innovation and the lead organisation, as well as the health economics, with the key output of the project being the independent evaluation of the outcomes. And then after the project, some of the typical exit points include being ready for follow-on funding, having the evidence and the business case for commissioning and procurement, or it could be moving on to a nice appraisal. Next slide, please. And then for the spread funding, again, I talked earlier about the criteria to be eligible for the funding, which is the entry point. And then the project may include several of the following. So setting up the service and, if needed, redesigning the pathway, assessing the needs for the workforce and what training is required and any accreditation, putting together the implementation timeline, milestones, and change management process. Where applicable, potentially double running with some existing services with a decommissioning plan. Defining the outcomes that need to be achieved in year 2 to inform a go, no-go decision on continuing the service for the commissioning and implementation. And then plans for transitioning the service to business as usual and its sustainability and longevity. And following the project, some of the exit points could include that the service is commissioned by the ICB across the Cancer Alliance region and is fully up and running, that any legacy services are decommissioned, and that ongoing monitoring of the performance of the service is in place. Next slide, please. So a few things to note if you are going to put together an application. If you're a company, then 100% of your costs will be covered by the funding. And then you'll be asked to break down the budget that's required into the following categories. So labour of the team at the lead organisation to deliver the project, material costs, including consumables or licenses that are required. Capital equipment costs can be covered, but they need to be reasonable considering the project timeframe. All partners, aside from the lead organisation, are considered subcontractors, and therefore all costs relating to partner organisations should go in this category. Travel and sustenance, and then other costs can include things like public and patient involvement, and also indirect costs. And these again should be reasonable considering the total budget. And then the budget and all of the costs are expected to reflect fair market value, and they will be assessed with this principle in mind. In terms of contracting, the contract for the funding is with the lead applicant. So there will be an example contract uploaded to the website soon, and the terms and the conditions of this contract are non-negotiable. So it's worth reading before you put in an application. Payments are milestone based, and they're typically quarterly and upfront. And then for monitoring and support, there are robust processes in place to monitor the progress of the projects. And additionally, there is support provided during the course of the project. This tends to be adapted to what the awardees need, but the overall aim is supporting further spread and adoption. And so the support can include increasing awareness of the innovation with relevant stakeholders, showcase and mentoring. Next slide, please. So there will be support along the way to help you develop your application. So for project teams that are looking for partners, SBRI does help with matchmaking, and I'll talk specifically about that on the next page. We will hold some online sessions that will walk through some tips for completing your application, how to use the portal, and plenty of Q&A. So please keep an eye out for these on the competition webpage on the SBRI website. And additionally, we'll publish some documents that will help you with your application. And these will include a copy of the application form so you can prepare it offline, an invitation to tender document that will include more information about the application assessment process, an example of terms and conditions of the contract, and some templates to help you with your evaluation planning. So the portal will open in the autumn. And I know I've already said it, but I cannot stress enough that it will really help you if you start working on your application now. Take the time to develop the partnerships you need and to pull together the information. And those supporting documents will be published over the coming weeks to help you prepare. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that matchmaking is something that SBRI can support with. So for innovators that are planning to apply for the real world implementation and evaluation funding, if you're looking for partners, you can submit a short online form, which could lead to your innovation being included in a booklet that is shared with all of the cancer alliances and health innovation networks. So the form is active now, and it closes next week on the 24th of June. You can access it via the competition web page. It is a competitive process, so we can't guarantee that all innovations will be highlighted. The matchmaking form is completely separate from the application process and is totally optional, so you can still apply for the funding whether or not you've looked for partners via SBRI. And then for the spread funding, there will be an online event for ICBs and cancer alliances to highlight some of the examples of innovations that are ready for spread funding and what would make a good project. And again, look out for that event on the SBRI website and our LinkedIn channel. Next slide, please. So the competition page is your best source of information to help you with your application and to keep up to date with any events or support that's available. And the link to that is on the bottom of this slide. Also, you can get in touch with us via email or phone, and the details are there if you have questions. So good luck with your applications, and I'll now hand back to Kate to introduce the next speaker.
Thank you, Charmaine, and I hope that your presentation, together with the others, has clarified some of the questions we have in the background. Oh, am I?
We
Can you hear me?
Katia?
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. So, thanks. So what I was saying is that I hope that Charmaine's presentation has clarified some of the questions we're receiving in the background. But in the meantime, it's time to introduce you to the final part of the event, in which we will have our key partners to talk about their role and how they can support. First up is Victoria Doyle, Assistant Director of the East of England Cancer Alliance, that is going to talk about the Cancer Alliance role in this competition. Over to you, Victoria. Unmute yourself. Don't do like me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you very much, Katerina, and thank you for inviting me to speak on behalf of what the Cancer Alliances can offer into this really exciting innovation open call. If we could move on to the next slide, please. So many of you will be aware of what Cancer Alliances are, but for those of you that aren't, I've just put in a summary slide here. So Cancer Alliances are NHS-led partnerships, and we coordinate cancer care across the whole system. There are around 20 cancer alliances in the east of England, and the map shows you the scale of those, some covering a large geography, others slightly smaller. But throughout all of this, we bring together the NHS providers, the ICBs, clinical leaders, patient voices, importantly, and also links to innovation, academia, and voluntary and charitable sectors. And it really is around driving improvement across those cancer pathways wider than individual organisations. If I can move us on to the next slide, please. So we do that in a number of different ways, and if we can move on, it will take us through about the deep subject matter expertise that Cancer Alliances hold, and we really understand what the cancer service landscape is like in our regions, and we do that through extensive clinical leadership. We work closely on pathway redesign. We are already involved in a number of different innovations, in many cases across our geography, and we really try and bring together that evidence base to support improvements in cancer care. We do that through a data-driven approach as well, if we can move on to the next section. So our informatics teams bring together high-quality benchmarks data and analytics, looking at how the services are working across the regions, where our challenge areas are, and they are very much used to influence the decisions that are made so that we can make sure we are making the best decisions to improve the outcomes for our patients across our areas. If we can move on to the next section. So we do this as well in partnership with our clinical leaders. So across the east of England, we have around 15 clinical networks. Others will be of a similar scale. And we bring together those strong clinical voices to help us to coordinate the care, to understand where good practice exists and how we might spread that, really trying to streamline and reduce the variation that we can see across services. And finally, on the next section here, we're very much in that space of the pathway and quality improvement, really trying to reduce variation, as I've touched upon, for that system-wide improvement and transformation, really keeping our patients at the very forefront of all the work that we do. Moving on to the next slide, please. And we have an important role within the NHS cancer system, and we bring together, sorry, the slides are just flicking about a little bit. Thank you very much aligned to those national priorities that we've all seen in recent documentation, the Fit for the Future, the 10-year health plan, and our cancer plan. So you will see alliances and our work reference within there. And we are about bringing that translation of those national priorities into local delivery, bringing together, as I say, the system-wide delivery of the cancer plan, reducing variation and improving the outcomes. And specifically for this discussion today, really our focus on the embedding of innovation into real cancer pathways and trying to accelerate that adoption and spread of those proven solutions, really, again, for the benefit of our patients. Moving on to the next slide, please. And what we can do together, working with innovators, this builds on established work that we've done through the previous open calls and outside of. But what we aim to do is to really align those solutions that you're developing with our real NHS priorities for our areas. We bring together the clinical and operational leaders that can help shape and influence those applications. We can understand where those innovations may fit within our pathways, within our region, what the adoption barriers may be, underpinning that with the data and the intelligence that I've touched upon already. And so we've had a strong record of supporting innovation through the alliances over many years now. So we've built up good expertise in this area. And we work together closely with our health innovation networks, and my colleague Nicola will talk to you a little bit more specifically about that shortly. But really where we've seen this work best is working between many alliances together and our health innovation networks to really understand the challenges and the solutions in greater depth. If I can move us on to the next slide, please. So we work together to try and showcase where the alliances and the innovation networks perhaps have their unique areas. But as you can see in the diagram, there is a shared space, and very much we see our roles as complementary in improving cancer outcomes and spreading innovation across our areas. And I think really the greatest impact, as I've touched upon, is where we've worked in close collaboration. And if I can move us on to the next slide, please. So this slide is detailed, but we will be sharing these afterwards. But really what this is trying to articulate is how alliances can support you either through the Real World Implementation and Evaluation Fund, which, as we've heard this afternoon, is more innovator-led, and also through the Innovation Spread Fund, which is alliance-led on behalf of our local ICBs. Many of us cover multiple ICBs, and so we would very much work together to understand where the greatest impact is for the area. So that goes into a little bit more detail, but picks up the themes that I've discussed about clinical engagement, patient leadership, system alignment, and bringing together all the key partners to really strengthen the credibility of the bids being put forward. And if I can move us on, please. So what this means for you is that we're very open to early discussions, and we'll provide that really early, honest feedback on how we see the innovations could potentially fit within our regions. As we've heard before, it would strengthen your application into the open call to make sure that we've worked together collaboratively on this. We can bring together the system engagement and that longer term view of how we might scale up these innovations across our regions. So we really want to hear from you, and we've put the SBRI contact details on the slides there, and they will coordinate the matchmaking opportunities. If I can move on, please. And that's just a big thank you again for having us, and we look forward to hearing from innovators and really excited to be part of this open call. Thank you very much, Katerina.
Thank you, Victoria. We're excited to work together on this. And now next up is Nicola Bent, the CEO of the Health Innovation Wessex, who's going to talk about the role of the network for this competition. Nicola, over to you.
Thanks, Kat. That's great. Thank you very much, everyone. And I'm delighted to be here on behalf of the Health Innovation Network. So yes, I'm Nicola Bent. I'm the Chief Exec of Health Innovation Wessex. So I cover the Hampshire and Isle of Wight and Dorset systems on the South Coast. And I know I'm joined by a number of health innovation colleagues from across England who work on the cancer agenda and who are really keen to collaborate on this fantastic opportunity. So on the next slide, please, I just provide a bit more context to the role that we perform in the same way as Victoria has done. And hopefully you'll get to see through these slides the complementarity between the Cancer Alliances and the HINs. So essentially we're commissioned by NHS England and the Office for Life Sciences as the innovation arm of the NHS. And we deliver boots on the ground implementation support to do 4 things really: to find innovations that meet the population health needs, and we develop an adoption ready pipeline of those innovations. We test those innovations and, importantly for this call, generate real world evidence through our work. We implement and will support implementation and ensuring alignment with the system needs and the problems that need to be solved, and then we support scaling of what works. And why we do this is to ultimately improve patient outcomes, to enhance and improve productivity, and importantly to grow, to promote economic growth. And you can see the little 4 circles there that provide some of the metrics that we have been recording over many years, and you can see the demonstrable impact of our work just highlighted on that slide. At the bottom of the slide you can see a list of our core Health Innovation Network capabilities, and I'll go into those in a bit more detail in subsequent slides. So on the next slide, please, it just demonstrates in a similar way to Victoria's the kind of geographical spread of the Health Innovation Networks. There are 15 HINs that work in a really deeply embedded way within our local systems, and we're really eager and ready to support this open competition. We really, through our work, understand the systems that we operate within, so we have a good sense of the people, processes, pathways, technologies, and we're really able to demonstrate impact through the application of our innovation adoption capabilities. On the next slide, just provides a bit more context in terms of we have a set of national commissions that we're asked to deliver on from NHS England and the Office for Life Science, but we also deploy our skills in other ways across emergent policy developments, new agendas and place-based needs. And you can see here some of the recent examples of additional activity that we're undertaking. On the next slide, we just drill into a bit more detail about the joint work, the collaborative work with Cancer Alliances, and we do this in close partnership. A number of HINs have jointly funded roles across Cancer Alliances. We have one in Wessex, I've had that for 6 years, so a joint post between Health Innovation Wessex and Wessex Cancer Alliance, and the collaboration has been really highly successful. This model is replicated in other areas. Some may not have joint funded posts, but have dedicated cancer specialist skills. So there's varying models, but the key message I'd like to take away is that we do work as a key partner with Cancer Alliances. This is all about, from our perspective, helping to identify and support implementation. So some examples on this slide, just to bring our capabilities to life. We support with funding opportunities such as the one today. We support applications to grants, as well as delivering local challenges, really trying to identify and support implementation of innovations. So Health Innovation North East, North Cumbria and the Northern Care Alliance have done some joint work supporting the delivery of 8 cancer innovation projects, including the use of AI in helping to detect prostate cancer, and the rising awareness of skin cancer in rural and coastal and farming communities, and encouraging patients to attend hospital appointments. West of England and SWAG Cancer Alliance have worked together to deliver on an innovation challenge that resulted in 7 cancer innovation projects receiving funding. So some real success stories there to bring this to life. Around identifying innovations, we often host innovation events. Health Innovation Southwest and Peninsula Cancer Alliance have recently been exploring innovations to meet local needs and providing horizon scans. There's a South London horizon scan on robotic process automation, and in terms of the independent evaluations, which is particularly relevant, I think, for this programme of work, this competition, we have evaluated innovative approaches in the East Midlands and the East Midlands Cancer Alliance. We've provided an independent evaluation of the inaugural community breast pain pathway, which led to national rollout. And Kent, Surrey, Sussex have evaluated the impact of transforming prostate cancer pathways with their Cancer Alliance too. And then in terms of innovation adoption and implementation, we have in Wessex a dedicated jointly funded role, as I've mentioned, and we've directly been involved in implementing innovations across 5 different pathways with the Cancer Alliance, ranging from digital platforms to diagnostic tests. And another example on this slide there is from Health Innovation North West Coast, who worked with South Yorkshire and Cumbria Cancer Alliance to implement one of the earliest pilots of capsule sponge vat innovation. So you can see how the joint work with Cancer Alliances is really demonstrating impact from those examples. On the next slide, please, we just highlight here some of the previous support for the Innovation Open Call. Health innovation teams have been involved as key partners around previous competitions. This includes 11 different HINs from across the 15, directly supporting a significant number of the 21 successful applications that Richard mentioned in his earlier slide. This has been a result of involvement in varying ways. So we can support with bid writing, we can facilitate stakeholder engagement, partnership working and convening conversations, importantly, including patient and public involvement partners. We can provide bespoke support for shortlisting and mock panel interviews. And then obviously, following successful outcomes of an application, we can continue to support the project through to implementation and the independent evaluation aspect as well. So supporting with planning and delivery. On the next slide, we just drill down into the two modes. So the first one obviously is the real world implementation and evaluation mode. So again, we can broker relationships through our deeply embedded way of working within our regions, and we can introduce partners and convene conversations. I've mentioned grant applications and bid writing, importantly thinking about implementation, but also commercialisation. We're obviously a key partner around real world evidence, and we have vast experience in providing independent evaluations for the adoption of innovations into health and social care settings. And this can include qualitative or quantitative analytic support, health economic support, really helping to demonstrate the impact and provide information for business cases that will sustain the use of innovation at the end of the project. And then just a few further examples there around bespoke support for implementation and that importantly, that transition into sustained adoption. On the next slide, just highlights spread and adoption and that mode and what support we can offer. And it's very similar, again, brokering relationships. As I say, we work in deep partnership with our ICBs and our local systems, and obviously, importantly, the Cancer Alliances, as we've demonstrated, I hope. So again, grant applications are key here. We can support there, sharing expertise around innovation spread across multiple sites. We can also support around offering de-implementation advice and decommissioning of services to make space for new innovation. Again, mock interviews and helping with that whole process. And then the real world evidence side and supporting with transition to business as usual. So on the next slide, just highlights how to get in touch. And there's multiple routes to getting in touch with HINs. You can get in touch with the HINs through your Cancer Alliances, but you can, and obviously local ICBs have direct contact with their HINs as well. But colleagues can approach any of the 15 HINs directly. Hopefully you can spot the HIN that's relevant to where you're located from the diagram. We have a central network page as well, with a functionality for you to contact your local health innovation network via that route, or you can contact each HIN directly through the contact details on the next slide. So hopefully when these slides are circulated, you can identify who to go to access this expertise and capacity that we can offer. So we're really looking forward to working with applicants during the next stage and hopefully building some impactful partnerships together, ultimately obviously improving outcomes for our patients. So thank you, Kat. I think that's the end for me.
Excellent, thank you. And now we are on to the last Q&A session. So yes, Victoria, if I can ask you on camera, also Charmaine and Emma, thank you. We will have quite a rich group to answer your questions. And I want to say thank you for switching to using the Q&A box. And I really like the creative way you are now using the chat for. People are posting opportunities for partnerships. So if you're looking for evaluators, sites, look at the chat. But for the questions to us, still use the Q&A box. Thank you. Okay, I will kick us off with one question. I think is probably more for both Nicola and Victoria. How do Cancer Alliances and Health Innovation Network work with your local ICBs? And who wants to start?
I can
okay,
do,
Victoria,
Katerina, if that's okay. And then Nicola, do please come in. So I think it's variable, Katerina, I would say. So for us in the east of England, we did have 6 ICBs, now have 3. So we are a multi-ICB Cancer Alliance. For the East of England, we do have a multi-stakeholder group encompassing all of our ICBs, a number of our providers, Health Innovation Network patient leaders and clinical leaders. And we meet together regularly to talk about the innovations that are coming through and how we might prioritise and work together on which ones are going to be the most impactful. Obviously, as I mentioned, underpinned by our excellent data and informatics team. So it is variable across the region, but I would say start having a conversation with your ICB and your Cancer Alliance leads, and they will direct you into exactly how best to influence that conversation. But there are many already scheduled ahead of this open call.
Sorry, thank you. And Nicola, anything to add?
Yeah, similar actually. Health Innovations networks, as I say, work in that deeply embedded way within our local systems. We work and co-design our activity with our ICBs to meet the system needs. And I mean, in Health Innovation Wessex, the ICBs are both on our board, as Victoria said, and we sit on obviously the Cancer Alliance board, etc. So there's a maturity of partnership that operates and that's in existence within local systems. I think you know, for us, we would be obviously for the real world evidence mode. For deployment to be successful, we clearly need to have the ICBs on board and supportive of the initiative. So you know, we can help broker some of those conversations, and then for the same for the spread mode as well. So yeah, I think I'm pretty confident that through our collaborative efforts, we can create some really impactful partnerships here and generate some really interesting data and evidence for future ongoing sustained adoption.
Thank you for that. And now, Claire, one of the attendees, thank you for waiting for so long. By now you understand why I was waiting to ask this question at this point, because Claire was asking, do you have any indication of which ICB or Cancer Alliance are likely to lead bids, and who within those organizations would typically lead them? And I think maybe, Emma, I'll start coming to you just to share, to reiterate the vision as why we wanted either ICB or Cancer Alliance to lead. And then maybe, Victoria, I'll go over to you for the details on what the Cancer Alliance can lead on. Do you mind, Emma, to kick us off?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, the overall vision is that the Innovation Spread Fund is really looking to spread and scale and innovation. And so we know that Cancer Alliances are really critical to be able to support that across their patch. But then we also know that integrated care boards are anticipated to be the strategic commissioners for their local populations moving forward. And so we wanted to have them involved as well to enable that transition into business as usual. So yeah, it's really just leveraging the expertise and roles of the two different organizations locally.
Thank you. And Victoria, anything to add?
Just building on what Emma said, and agreed, we would be looking to work with innovators in both of the challenges and both of the funding modes. So very much looking at our geography, what our clinical and patient leaders are telling us about the needs, what our data and informatics is telling us about the needs of the areas. And so we can bring together those relationships and partners. We can also support with the applications. Previously, we've been representation on the panels, for example, and supporting innovators in a number of different ways. So I think it's really, let's start the conversation. Let's see what the innovations are. Let's look at how it can be implemented across our individual regions, and then what the support needs are. And as we touched upon, I think in both of our presentations with Nicola and myself, we do look to support the innovations post-success as well. So the support doesn't stop when the innovations are awarded the funding. Thanks, Katerina. Was there anything further you wanted me to cover?
Yeah, I think just briefly, because the question was more, I think, focused on the ICB and how do you see that a Cancer Alliance can lead versus an ICB, an application for the Spread Fund, which you highlighted, but maybe if you don't mind to reiterate what role you can have in that specific funding mode.
Absolutely, and our ICBs know us well and the work that we do with them. So it is a partnership. I think we would want to develop it together, knowing how it might work in different aspects of our geography. As I said, we've got 3 ICBs, so there may be a more focused role for the Alliance to lead it with contributions of. For the alliances where it's a single ICB, single Cancer Alliance, the relationship might be very slightly different. That's why I think it's really important to start that conversation with your alliance. And I know that SBRI hold the contact details for how to get in touch with the Cancer Alliances and who's best placed to do that. And then let's see, but very much looking for the support and looking to work with them because this is such an exciting opportunity for our patients.
Thank you. And yeah, I think that we appreciate that it is a busy time for some of the ICBs, and that's why, we thought and agreed with Cancer Alliances that you would be able to support in some aspect of that. So thank you. And now I think I have a question that I will ask Charmaine probably to answer. Are sites in Wales or Northern Ireland eligible?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Short answer is no. So organisations or applicants that are based in Wales or Northern Ireland are eligible, but the sites for implementation must be in England.
Thank you. Yeah, I think it's more obviously you are welcome to other sites, but we'll only be funding sites in England. So thank you, Charmaine. And now I have a question about the first funding stream, just for a change, real world implementation. Someone is asking if they could partner with as many cancer alliances and health innovation network as they need. But in the second stream, instead, there is a single application limit. Is that correct? Emma, you're nodding, so do you wanna? I mean, yes,
sure.
probably, but
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the short answer is that is correct. Of course, it will be up to the cancer alliances in that first example as to whether they can, whether they are able to support across multiple projects. But yes, yes is the answer to that question.
Thank you. And we knew we were gonna be asked this question. So we've been asked how much funding is allocated across both challenges and how many projects do we expect to fund across each. Emma, do you want to go on this as well?
Yeah, so we can share that the overall budget is 18 million across. And that's not restricted to any particular challenge area or any either of the two funding models. So what we will do is when the applications come in, they will be assessed in terms of their potential impact on the earlier diagnosis area or on productivity, depending on which challenge area they're submitted against. And then there will be a decision from our independent panel of experts as to which ones meet the quality bar and a ranking, and then also a decision around the best portfolio of projects to move ahead with. So there isn't at this point any set allocation of that 18 million between the two challenge areas or between the funding modes.
Yeah, I think quality is the mantra for us at the moment. Thanks, Emma. Now I have a question for Nicola. Rightfully so, the attendees saying that the hints are going to be inundated with requests for help and guidance after this. How are you going to triage all these requests and support applicants appropriately?
Yeah, I mean, we have, as part of our governance arrangements, we have a cancer working group, which has the representations that I've mentioned, and many of those folk are on the call today, of individuals that are deeply embedded in this sort of work. So they know that this open call competition is live. They've indeed, as I mentioned in my slide, have offered support over previous rounds successfully, which is really great. So I think we'll just continue in the way we have previously, and I'm hopeful. Well, I'm pretty confident that the HINs will do a great job at providing that help and guidance and triaging as appropriate. It may well be that people approach certain HINs, but actually it's more appropriate to direct them to another HIN. So we will work that through as we've done in previous rounds.
Thank you, Nicola. And now I have a question. I think this is for you, Charmaine. Someone is asking if we can explain the process after. So this is talking about the matchmaking. we're offering support for the real world implementation and evaluation funding mode. And can you explain, please, the process after completing the matchmaking form and video on the website? What happens for everyone waiting to connect after the 24th of June?
Sure, no problem. So as I mentioned before, it is competitive. We're not able to highlight hundreds of innovations if we get a lot. So there will be a selection process. So if you'll be contacted by the 26th, and if your innovation has been selected, you'll be asked to produce a short video, and this will be shared with all of the cancer alliances and the health innovation networks, basically giving them a bit more information about your innovation so they can choose to contact you for partnership. For anyone who is not successful or doesn't fill in a form, they can still contact both the health innovation networks and the cancer alliances independently. What the form and the information that we're gathering does is give them a bit more information so that they know where it fits with their priorities and how they can best support you.
Thank you, Charmaine. And I hope that clarifies. Anyway, you can contact us on our email address if not. Now I have a question that is probably maybe for Emma to start, and then we can follow up on that together if needed. But Ajit is asking, some innovations are so new that they do not exist on current procurement frameworks. Are they still eligible for the spread fund if they exist within NHS trusts?
I think our expectation would be that they would be on a procurement framework to be eligible for the spread fund. So yeah, that's the short answer. In terms of getting onto procurement frameworks, quite a lot of procurement frameworks are dynamic purchasing systems. So actually the process for accessing them is pretty quick. As I understand it, it can be as little as 2 weeks. So I would encourage you to ready yourself for a spread, to look into accessing and being taken onto those procurement frameworks.
And I suppose our approach to request this is that we want you to be procurement ready. So we want there to be a mechanism by which the ICB can procure you and can buy you at the end of this funding. So obviously, if there is a specific case, you can follow up with more questions. We'd be happy to look into it. But yeah, that's the eligibility criteria. Thank you. Thank you, Emma. Now there is a question, I think it's probably again for you, Emma, but I don't know if Nicola, in terms of evaluation side of things from the HIN, you want to also chip in after. Innovation, at least deployed at one site, is one of our entry criteria and evidence of safety and clinical utility. How much should be sample size for this? And if it's okay, a small pilot project. So what do we really mean with this entry criterion?
So do you mean how many sites do we require for the entry, or do we require for the actual project? Sorry, just to...
No, it's the entry criterion, sorry. It's the entry criterion. Do we have a number of sites, or which, I mean, I guess is no, but maybe if you want to articulate.
Yeah, so our entry criteria is a minimum of 1 site. And that can be for the early diagnosis challenge, that can be an international site. It doesn't have to be an English site, but for the productivity challenge, just because we know that there are quite a lot of innovations out there that can potentially apply, we wanted to see that evidence from an English site. I guess just in terms of the definition of a site, that will depend on whether it's being used and deployed in primary care or in secondary care. So in secondary care, the definition would be a trust. In primary care, that's a little bit more little bit more difficult, but I guess we would probably think about a primary care network as a site.
And I think in terms of evidence of safety and clinical utility as well, we don't have a sample size for that, but the evidence has to be convincing enough that it's safe.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's difficult to specify a sample size because it will be dependent on the particular innovation, certainly, and also the sort of delta of impact that we need to see to be clinically meaningful.
Thank you. Thank you very much for clarifying. So I think I can move on to the next question. There's something I'm going to ask Charmaine for this. So is CE UKCA marking mandatory at the application stage for the innovation?
So certainly they should have applied for their regulatory approval, but we will publish a cut-off date for when you expect to receive your regulatory approval on the website. If it's a very short time after the application closes, that's normally okay, but look out for the published application published cut-off date for when you need to have received your regulatory approval.
Thank you. And now I have a question for Victoria and Nicola. Your presentation was very clear on how cancer alliances and health innovation networks work in partnership. Can you please articulate the main distinction between the roles that the two organizations have? I know that that was quite explicit in Victoria's presentation, but I guess, Nicola, do you want to maybe add something to that?
Yeah, I mean, I hope what came across in both our presentations is the fact that our roles are really complementary. We do have specific roles, and there was a neat Venn diagram, if you recall, in Victoria's presentation, with the shared space, the intersect being around innovation in cancer, pathway redesign, adoption and spread, and sort of working collaboratively together. But from a health innovation perspective, we do tend to work across the find, test, implement and scale continuum with a particular focus on innovation and improvement. We do do cover all disease areas, not just cancer. We are experts in scale and spread, and we work in that intersect between academia, life sciences and health and care, which means that we can convene and work in partnership across those various sectors. And obviously, one of the things that we do, and we've promoted that through today's presentation, is our expertise in independent evaluation in RWE, including health economics as well. So those are sort of the specific elements of our role. And then obviously, Victoria, do you want to just fill in the other side of the Venn diagram?
Yeah, absolutely, Nicola, and thank you for the question, Katerina. So absolutely, I think where we see it working best is when we come together in that shared space. But yeah, cancer alliances are the delivery arm for cancer, and very much the experts in local awareness of cancer and the priorities and what's working in our systems. Really focused heavily on those cancer outcomes and survivorship for our patients, and bring together all those clinical leaders as well as patient leaders within that cancer field. So really working in collaboration with our Health Innovation Network. We have the expertise in cancer and to a point in innovation, but we very much value the expertise of our Health Innovation Networks in that innovation and evaluation space as well. So very collaborative, very complementary. Thanks, Katerina.
Thank you both. And I'm conscious of time. I'll ask another couple of questions and then we will wrap up. A question from Nigel is for you, Charmaine. Will the assessment criteria and their weights be published before the application portal opens in September?
Yes, the short answer is yes for that, Nigel. Those will be included in what's called the invitation to tender document, and you will see that on the website over the coming weeks, so well before the application portal opens in September.
Thank you. So I'll ask a question from Nareen then. They want to get more clarity on the funding for the year 2 of the spread route. What will be funded by SBRI and what will be funded by ICB, since the key performance indicators will only be met at year end of year 2. So Emma, do you want to have a go at that one, please?
Yeah, so I think the first thing to say is that the go, no go point, we probably wouldn't expect to be all the way at the end of year 2. It would probably be midway or 3/4 of the way, because as Noreen has pointed out, there needs to be a transition to then the ICB funding during that year. The proposed distribution of funds between NHS England and the ICB, we're actually allowing applicants to propose that. So the idea is that the applicant will, within their application, propose how they will transition the funding and at what point and based on what outcomes. So it really is down to the adopters, the commissioners, to articulate that. And then we will sense check it and make sure that it's sensible.
Thank you. And I think I'm afraid I have to draw the line to the Q&A session here, although we have many more questions, and I promise that next week we will answer all of them in our updated FAQ page on the website. But for the moment, before we call the meeting to a close, I wanted to just remind, so I said about the FAQ, reminder about also the matchmaking for the real world implementation and evaluation. The form is open until the 24th of June. We will also be organizing some showcase activities for ICBs to understand a little bit better the spread fund model. We appreciate it's very new and there is a lot to unpack around that. And we will use some real innovation to demonstrate what we need and what we're looking for. And don't worry if you don't know when we are opening, you didn't miss anything. We will publish our timelines on the website. We're thinking to open second half of September, but watch this space. Things will come in the upcoming weeks. And I think if we can go to the last slide, I just wanted to remind you our contact details. You can reach out to us through our inbox. We also have a phone number. Please do so. We're on at the other end of the email. We will answer your questions. And we will also organize more Q&A sessions in the next few months. We're talking about this now because we want to give you time to prepare. We know they will take quite a long time, so we wanted to make sure that you could start now. So if we can, I think, wrap up, I want to thank our speakers today. You've been great. Thank you, all of you, for staying. Sorry for those whose questions weren't answered, but they will come. And do not hesitate to reach out to us if you need anything. Thank you all. See you soon. And good luck.